The sun blazed over Sandstone Air Force Base, its merciless rays beating down on the cracked tarmac like a punishment from above. The heat rose in visible waves, distorting the horizon where the desert met the sky in a hazy embrace. Captain Alexandra, Alex Vega, stood motionless on the flight line, her slim frame dwarfed by the massive aircraft surrounding her. At barely 5 feet 4 inches and 120 pounds soaking wet, she looked more like someone who had wandered onto the base by accident than one of the most qualified pilots in the United States Air Force. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you, Vega. The booming voice of Colonel Marcus Reynolds cut through the scorching air like a knife. I don't think I heard you correctly. Did you just volunteer for Operation Deadfall? Colonel Reynolds stood at an imposing 6'0", his broad shoulders straining against his flight suit, looking like he'd been carved from granite specifically for Air Force recruitment posters. His weathered face, etched with lines from years of high-altitude flying and command decisions, contorted into an expression somewhere between amusement and contempt. Alex met his gaze without flinching, her dark eyes betraying none of the fire burning inside her. Yes, sir. I'm volunteering for Operation Deadfall. The circle of pilots surrounding them erupted in barely suppressed laughter. Captain Jennifer Harding's high-pitched giggle mixed with the deeper guffaws of male pilots who had gathered to witness what was becoming a daily ritual. The humiliation of the squadron's token female. Maybe she needs a different aircraft, called out Major Derek Thompson, a stocky pilot from Texas whose father was a decorated general at the Pentagon. I hear they're making Hello Kitty toy planes now. Better size for her. More laughter rippled through the group as Alex maintained her composure, her spine straight as a rod despite the verbal assault. She was used to this, the mockery, the condescension, the constant reminders that she didn't belong in their elite world of combat aviation. Operation Deadfall, Reynolds said slowly, as if explaining a complex concept to a child, is a tactical strike mission through the most heavily defended airspace we've ever simulated. Our most experienced combat pilots have attempted this run 17 times in the simulator. No one has completed it. Not one pilot. He gestured grandly to the assembled aviators, most of whom nodded along with his speech like disciples receiving wisdom from their prophet. These weren't ordinary Air Force pilots. The 87th Ghost Squadron only accepted the absolute best of the best, the children of generals and admirals, graduates of the Air Force Academy with perfect scores, future leaders of America's aerial warfare doctrine. I know the mission parameters, sir, Alex replied, her voice steady despite the ridicule surrounding her. Do you? Reynolds stepped closer, towering over her. Because I don't think you understand what you're volunteering for. This isn't one of your supply runs or medical evacuations. This is combat flying that requires split-second decisions, precision targeting, and maneuvers that generate G-forces that would snap your little neck. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Alex had memorized every detail of Operation Deadfall during her preparation. The mission called for a lone A-10 Thunderbolt II pilot to navigate through an enemy valley bristling with surface-to-air missile sites, anti-aircraft artillery, and enemy fighter patrols. The pilot would need to destroy a high-value target, a bunker housing enemy leadership, and extract through the same deadly corridor, all while operating under strict radio silence and with no support. The mission was designed to be impossible, a test of mental fortitude as much as flying skill. It was the ultimate evaluation for the Ghost Squadron, and so far, it had broken the spirit of every pilot who attempted it. I understand the mission completely, Colonel, Alex said quietly. Reynolds laughed, a sound like breaking glass that sent chills down the spines of even the most hardened pilots. You understand the mission? Sweetheart, If you can't handle basic formation flying without getting vertigo, what makes you think you'll survive the most challenging combat mission ever designed? Alex met his eyes for just a moment, and something flickered there, a flash of something dark and dangerous that made Reynolds take an involuntary step backward. But then it was gone, replaced by the familiar submissive look of someone clearly in over her head. "I just thought, I want to serve my country," she said, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine emotion. The pilots exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes at what they perceived as pathetic desperation. But Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, the squadron's chief mechanic, stepped forward, his boots crunching on the tarmac with military precision. "All right, show's over," he called out, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. "Reynolds, Hardin, Thompson, you've got pre-flight briefings in 10. The rest of you, disperse." As the crowd dispersed, Rodriguez approached Alex with deliberate slowness. She kept her head down, playing the part of the humiliated pilot, but she could feel his eyes boring into her like laser beams. "Vega," he said quietly. "A word." Alex's pulse quickened, but she nodded meekly. "Yes, Sergeant." Rodriguez waited until the other pilots were completely out of earshot before speaking again, his weathered face unreadable as carved stone. "That was quite a scene you caused there. I'm sorry, Sergeant. I know I need to work on my confidence." "Confidence?" Rodriguez repeated the word slowly, as if he was tasting something bitter. "Funny thing about confidence, Vega. Most people, when they're being ridiculed like that, they flinch, they look away. But you didn't even blink. Your breathing didn't change. Your pupils didn't dilate. That's not lack of confidence. That's control." Alex's blood turned to ice water in her veins, but she kept her expression completely blank. "I don't understand, Sergeant." Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Finally he nodded slowly. "Maybe not. But I'll be watching you, Vega. Something tells me there's more to you than meets the eye." As he walked away, Alex allowed herself a small, satisfied smile hidden from view. Let him watch. By the time he figured out what he was really looking at, it would be far too late for him or anyone else at Sandstone to prevent what was coming. The game had officially begun, and Alexandra Vega was about to remind everyone why the Ghost Division's operatives were the most feared pilots in the world. 3 weeks had passed since Alex's confrontation with Colonel Reynolds, and her reputation as the squadron's most spectacular failure had only solidified into something approaching legend among the pilots. During formation exercises, she consistently broke formation, her flying apparently too erratic to maintain proper spacing with other aircraft. In weapons training, she fumbled with targeting systems so badly that instructor, Kim, had to demonstrate the same basic procedure 4 separate times. During tactical simulations, she made rookie mistakes that got her shot down within minutes of mission start. Vega did it again, Jennifer Harding whispered loudly during breakfast, making absolutely sure her voice carried across the mess hall. "I heard she actually threw up during yesterday's hazy training. Actually vomited in her oxygen mask, tears and everything." The table erupted in snickers and barely suppressed laughter. Alex sat alone at the far end of the hall, mechanically spooning oatmeal into her mouth while staring at her tray with the defeated posture of someone barely hanging on to their last thread of hope. Her shoulders were hunched in defeat, her flight suit wrinkled and slightly too large for her frame. To anyone watching, she looked like someone who would wash out within days. What they couldn't see was the micro camera hidden in her collar button, recording every conversation within a 30-foot radius. They had no idea that her clumsy stumble near the officers' table yesterday had allowed her to plant a listening device under their usual seats. And they certainly didn't know that her pathetic performance in simulator training had given her unsupervised access to the flight computer systems for nearly 20 minutes at a time. "I actually feel bad for her," Lieutenant Rebecca Martinez said quietly, glancing over at Alex's isolated table with genuine concern in her voice. Rebecca was one of the few female pilots in the squadron, a genuinely kind woman from New Mexico whose father was a decorated Marine colonel. "Don't," Reynolds cut her off sharply, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "The weak don't survive here, Martinez. The sooner Vega learns that harsh reality, the better it'll be for everyone involved. Besides," he leaned forward conspiratorially, "I heard from a very reliable source that she's not even supposed to be here." Alex's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. This was new information, potentially valuable intelligence that hadn't appeared in any of her briefing materials. "What do you mean?" Major Thompson asked, leaning forward with the eager expression of someone who lived for squadron gossip. Reynolds glanced around dramatically, ensuring he had everyone's complete attention before continuing in a stage whisper. "My father knows someone high up in personnel. Apparently, Vega's file just appeared overnight about a month before she was transferred here. No prior combat experience, no distinguished service record, no special qualifications worth mentioning. Just, poof, suddenly, she's assigned to the most elite fighter squadron in the entire Air Force." "That's impossible," Jennifer protested, her voice rising with indignation. "The waiting list for Ghost Squadron is 3 years long, minimum. My father had to call in multiple favors just to get me considered for admission." "Exactly my point," Reynolds replied, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction at having insider knowledge. "Which means either someone very powerful wanted her here, or someone made a very expensive mistake that's about to be corrected." Alex filed this information away while maintaining her dejected posture. Her insertion into Ghost Squadron had been handled by Ghost Division's best forgers and hackers, professionals who could rewrite reality itself when necessary. But apparently, their work hadn't been quite perfect enough to fool everyone who mattered. That was definitely concerning and would need to be reported to her handlers immediately. The conversation was interrupted by the sharp blast of the morning assembly whistle. Pilots began filing out of the mess hall toward the briefing room for their daily assignments, but Alex deliberately lagged behind, pretending to struggle with organizing her tray and personal items. As the hall emptied of witnesses, she made her move with practiced precision. The kitchen staff was busy preparing for lunch service, giving Alex a clear path to the service corridors that ran beneath the main building like a hidden circulatory system. She had memorized the base's blueprints during her mission preparation, including the sections that weren't included on any official architectural plans. Sandstone had been built on the site of a Cold War-era missile silo complex, and some of the old infrastructure remained intact, providing perfect routes for someone who needed to move unseen. Moving with practiced silence that came from years of specialized training, Alex slipped through a maintenance door and into the tunnel system. Here, away from cameras and witnesses, her entire demeanor changed instantly. The hunched shoulders straightened into perfect military posture. The uncertain gait became fluid and predatory. The lost little girl vanished completely, replaced by something far more dangerous. She had exactly 47 minutes before her absence would be noticed and reported. Alex's first destination was the administration building's sub-basement. The main server room hummed behind reinforced doors. The security here was military-grade biometric scanners, motion detectors, pressure-sensitive floors, designed to detect even the slightest unauthorized presence. For a normal intruder, penetration would be absolutely impossible. Alex wasn't normal by any definition of the word. She produced a small device from a hidden pocket in her flight suit, a piece of technology that officially didn't exist in any government inventory. The biometric scanner read her fingerprints as belonging to Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, the base's head of information systems. The device had cost Ghost Division 3 months of surveillance and a carefully orchestrated accident that had allowed them to lift Hawthorne's prints from her coffee cup. Inside the server room, Alex worked with mechanical precision. She wasn't here to steal data that would leave traces that could be detected during routine security sweeps. Instead, she was installing monitoring software that would piggyback on the base's own systems, completely invisible to standard detection protocols. Every email, every file transfer, every database query would now be automatically copied to a secure server farm in Virginia. 28 minutes remaining. Her next target was General Harrison's office, 3 floors up and protected by an entirely different set of security measures. Alex moved through the building's ventilation system like a ghost, her small size allowing her to navigate spaces that would be impossible for larger operatives. She had performed this kind of infiltration dozens of times before in places far more dangerous than an Air Force base. Harrison's office was a treasure trove of classified information personnel files, mission schedules, communication logs with Pentagon officials. Alex photographed everything with a camera no bigger than a shirt button, her movements economical and absolutely silent. But it was what she discovered in Harrison's personal safe that made her blood run cold. Financial records, bank transfers, payments to offshore accounts that had no legitimate explanation whatsoever. General Carl Harrison, the decorated war hero and base commander, was selling secrets to someone. But to whom? And more importantly, how deep did this corruption run through the base's command structure? 15 minutes remaining. Alex was preparing to extract when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy boots moving with military precision. She froze, listening intently to the pattern. 2 people, both male based on stride length and weight distribution. One was definitely Harrison. She had memorized his distinctive gait during her first week of observation. The other footsteps were unfamiliar but equally purposeful. "We can't afford any more delays," Harrison was saying as they approached his office, his voice tight with stress. "The buyers are getting impatient, and impatient buyers tend to make dangerous decisions." "The merchandise is delicate," replied the second voice, which Alex now recognized as belonging to Sergeant Rodriguez. "One mistake and we lose everything, including our heads." Alex's mind raced with implications. Rodriguez was involved, too. The conspiracy was deeper than she had initially suspected. How many others were compromised? How far up did the corruption reach? The door handle turned. Alex had perhaps 3 seconds before they entered the office and discovered her presence. A normal person would be trapped, caught red-handed with classified documents spread across the desk. But Alex had been trained by the most elite operatives in the world. She moved like liquid shadow, flowing silently across the room and up into a position above the doorframe. Her body pressed against the ceiling tiles, weight distributed across multiple support beams to avoid triggering any pressure sensors. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate to minimize even the slightest sound. Harrison and Rodriguez entered below her, completely unaware of the predator hanging mere inches above their heads, listening to every word they spoke. "The Rodriguez girl is becoming a significant problem," Rodriguez said, settling into a chair across from Harrison's desk with obvious familiarity. "She's not what she appears to be. Her reactions are all wrong." Alex's blood turned to ice as she realized they were discussing her specifically. "What do you mean?" Harrison asked, moving to his safe with practiced ease. "Her failures are too perfect, too calculated. And today, during high-G training, I saw something that bothered me considerably." Rodriguez leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "When she supposedly blacked out in the centrifuge, her vital signs never changed. No elevated heart rate, no blood pressure drop, nothing. I've only seen that kind of physiological control in classified Special Forces manuals." Harrison paused, his hand frozen on the safe door. "You think she's military intelligence?" "I think she's something much worse than standard military intelligence," Rodriguez replied grimly. "The way she moves when she thinks no one is watching. I've seen that kind of training before. Black operations, deep cover specialists, elite infiltration units. His voice dropped even further. What if she's here investigating us specifically? The two men stared at each other for a long tension-filled moment. Finally, Harrison spoke with deadly calm. Then we eliminate the problem tonight, permanently. Alex remained perfectly still as they discussed the specific details of her planned murder. They would make it look like an accident, a training mishap perhaps, or a suicide brought on by the overwhelming stress of squadron life. Rodriguez knew the perfect location, an abandoned hangar where accidents had happened before. After they left, Alex dropped silently to the floor, her mind already shifting into combat mode. Her cover was blown, but she had learned something invaluable in return. The corruption at Sandstone wasn't just about selling military secrets to foreign governments. It was about selling something they called merchandise, something delicate and valuable enough to kill for without hesitation. She had to get word to her handlers immediately. But first, she had to survive the night and the professional killers who would be hunting her. As Alex slipped back through the ventilation system, she allowed herself a cold, predatory smile. Harrison and Rodriguez thought they were hunting a frightened little girl who had stumbled into something beyond her understanding. They had no idea. They had just declared war on a ghost who specialized in making people disappear forever. The abandoned east hangar of Sandstone Air Force Base stood like a monument to forgotten wars, its metal walls scarred by decades of desert wind and institutional neglect. Built during the height of the Cold War as a maintenance facility for nuclear-capable bombers, it had been officially sealed off after a structural collapse in the 1990s that killed 2 maintenance workers. Officially, it was off-limits to all personnel without specific authorization. Unofficially, it was the perfect place to dispose of problems that required permanent solutions. Alex moved through the darkened structure at 11:47 p.m., her military-grade night vision, goggles turning the pitch-black maze into a green-tinted landscape of shadows and deadly angles. She had been here for nearly 20 minutes, setting her trap with the methodical precision of someone who had orchestrated similar scenarios dozens of times before. Pressure plates hidden under loose floorboards. Trip wires connected to military-grade flashbang grenades. A dozen different ways to kill or incapacitate anyone foolish enough to come hunting for her in this metal tomb. But as she crouched behind a collapsed section of wall, checking her watch for the 3rd time in 2 minutes, Alex knew something was fundamentally wrong with the situation. Harrison and Rodriguez should have arrived by now, according to the timeline she had overheard. Their plan had been brutally simple. Lure her here with a fake emergency message supposedly from Rebecca, then stage a tragic accident in the structurally unstable building. Clean, untraceable, tragic. Instead, she heard footsteps approaching from 3 different directions simultaneously. Alex's blood chilled as she recognized the tactical formation. This wasn't a simple murder carried out by 2 corrupt base officials. This was a coordinated military operation being executed by trained professionals. Through her encrypted earpiece, she could hear whispered communications between at least 6 different operators moving through the building with textbook precision. Viper 1 in position, north corridor secured. Viper 2, east stairwell clear. No contacts. Viper 3, basement access point confirmed, clear. These weren't base security forces playing at being soldiers. These were real operators, special forces professionals with combat experience and advanced training. Alex pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the pieces of a much larger puzzle fell into place with terrifying clarity. The merchandise that Harrison and Rodriguez had discussed wasn't classified information or stolen military technology. It was people. Specifically, it was her. Somehow, someone with significant resources and intelligence capabilities had figured out that a Ghost Division operative was embedded at Sandstone Air Force Base, and they had set an elaborate trap that went far beyond the capabilities of 2 corrupt base officials. Target should be in the central chamber based on our intelligence, came Rodriguez's voice through her intercepted communications. Remember, we need her alive and functional. The buyers want to know everything she knows about Ghost Division operations before we dispose of her. Alex's jaw clenched with barely controlled rage. Ghost Division's existence was the most closely guarded secret in the American military establishment. If foreign intelligence agencies had discovered the identity of one of their operatives, they wouldn't simply kill her quickly. They would torture every piece of classified intelligence out of her first. The locations of safe houses, the identities of other operatives, the details of ongoing missions around the globe. Thousands of American lives hung in the balance, and she was the key that could unlock all of it. She had to escape this trap immediately and get word to her handlers. Every second she remained here increased the danger to her fellow operatives. Alex began moving toward the south exit, the one route that appeared clear of hostile forces according to her surveillance. But as she rounded a corner with practiced stealth, she found herself face to face with Colonel Reynolds. Except this wasn't the arrogant squadron commander who had been tormenting her for weeks. Reynolds held a military-grade assault rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who had used similar weapons in actual combat situations. His expensive watch, the one that had seemed out of place for a pilot's budget, suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't purchased with Daddy's money. It was payment for services rendered to foreign handlers. The squadron star pilot was a foreign intelligence asset, probably embedded for years. "Hello, Alex," Reynolds said softly, his weapon trained on her center mass with professional competence. "Or should I say Lieutenant Vega of Ghost Division?" Alex kept her hands clearly visible, her posture non-threatening despite every combat instinct screaming at her to strike first and ask questions later. "I don't know what you're talking about, Reynolds." Reynolds laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, only cold professionalism. The helpless little girl act was genuinely impressive. "I'll give you that much credit. You had me completely fooled for weeks, but my handlers are extremely thorough professionals. They've been tracking Ghost Division operations for years, waiting patiently for an opportunity exactly like this one." "Your handlers?" Alex asked, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation. "Chinese Ministry of State Security," Reynolds replied with obvious pride. "I've been embedded here since I was 16 years old, building my cover identity, establishing my reputation, waiting for something truly valuable to fall into my lap." His smile was predatory and cold. "Imagine my surprise when one of America's most classified operatives walked right through the front gates of my base." Alex's mind raced through tactical options with computer-like efficiency. The corridor was narrow, giving her extremely limited room to maneuver. Reynolds was positioned perfectly with clear lines of fire and multiple escape routes if the situation deteriorated. He had been trained well by professionals who understood exactly what they were dealing with. But he was making one critical mistake. He was talking instead of shooting. "How did you figure it out?" Alex asked, taking a small step forward that would appear to be nervous fidgeting to an untrained observer. In reality, she was positioning herself for a potential strike. "Your simulator performance last week was the final piece of evidence we needed," Reynolds replied, clearly enjoying his moment of triumph. "Those techniques you used don't exist in any standard Air Force training manual. My handlers ran the footage through their extensive databases and got a positive match techniques used by a Ghost Division operative in Syria 3 years ago." Reynolds' eyes glittered with satisfaction and barely contained excitement. "An operative who was supposedly killed in action, according to all official records. Except here you are, very much alive and playing dress-up at an Air Force base." Another step. Alex was now within striking distance, but she needed him distracted for just a few more seconds. "So what's the plan now?" she asked. "Torture me for classified information, then eliminate me?" "Eventually, yes," Reynolds admitted with disturbing casualness. "But first, we're going to have some fun." You see, I've been taking orders and abuse from instructors and fellow pilots for 4 long years, building my cover identity. Do you have any idea how humiliating it's been pretending to be some spoiled American military brat? Reynolds's voice carried genuine anger now, the first real emotion he had displayed. I think it's time for some well-deserved payback before we get down to serious business. He gestured with his rifle toward a side chamber that Alex knew would be perfect for an interrogation. Move slowly and keep your hands where I can see them. Alex nodded meekly and began to turn as instructed, then exploded into motion with blindingly devastating speed. Her left hand swept upward to deflect the rifle barrel while her right hand drove toward Reynolds's throat in a strike designed to crush his windpipe. But Reynolds was faster and better trained than she had anticipated. Professionals who knew exactly what Ghost Division operatives were capable of had prepared him for this exact scenario. He twisted away from her strike with fluid grace and brought the rifle butt around toward her head in a counterattack that would have killed a normal person. Alex ducked under the blow and drove her knee toward his solar plexus, but Reynolds caught her leg and used her own momentum to slam her against the metal wall with bone-jarring force. Stars exploded across her vision as her head connected with the rough surface, and she tasted blood where she had bitten her tongue. "Not bad at all," Reynolds panted, pressing the rifle barrel against her neck with enough pressure to restrict her breathing. "But I've been training specifically to fight Ghost Division operatives for 2 years. My handler showed me hours of footage demonstrating your techniques, your preferred strikes, your tactical weaknesses." Alex tasted more blood where she had bitten through her tongue, but she managed to speak. "Weaknesses? You're too small, too light for sustained combat," Reynolds explained with clinical detachment. "In a straight fight against someone with equal training but superior size, you lose every single time. The only reason Ghost Division operatives are effective is surprise and superior equipment. Take those advantages away, and you're just another soldier." Alex met his eyes and smiled, blood staining her teeth red in a grin that would have terrified anyone with sense. "You're absolutely right about one thing, Reynolds. In a straight fight, I would lose eventually." Reynolds frowned, sensing something wrong in her tone and body language. "Good thing I never fight fair," Alex added conversationally. The explosion came from the pressure plate Alex had triggered when she stepped into the corridor, not the one under her feet, but the one she had positioned exactly 3 steps behind Reynolds' current position. Time to detonate precisely 90 seconds after activation. The blast wasn't designed to kill, just to disorient and create the chaos she needed to turn the tables. Reynolds spun toward the sound, his professional training taking over, and Alex struck with lethal precision. Her hand found the nerve cluster at the base of his neck, a pressure point that would paralyze his right arm for several minutes. As his rifle clattered to the floor, Alex's other hand drove into his kidney with surgical accuracy. Reynolds dropped to his knees, gasping in pain and shock as Alex retrieved his weapon and checked the chamber fully loaded with military ammunition. Definitely not standard Air Force equipment. "You made another critical mistake," Alex said conversationally, keeping the rifle trained on Reynolds as he struggled to breathe. "You assumed I was here alone." Reynolds looked up at her with confusion and growing fear clouding his features. "Ghost Division never operates solo on foreign soil," Alex continued, her smile cold as winter death. "My partner has been watching this entire time, feeding me intelligence through encrypted channels. He's the one who told me about the pressure plate timing. He's also the one currently eliminating your backup team." As if summoned by her words, the sound of gunfire echoed through the abandoned building. Short, controlled bursts followed by ominous silence. Professional work executed with mechanical precision. "You see, Reynolds," Alex continued, "the Chinese aren't the only ones who've been planning this operation for years. We've known about the security leaks at Sandstone for months. My mission was never just to identify the traitors. It was to roll up the entire enemy network." Reynolds tried to speak but only managed a strangled whisper. "Don't worry," Alex said, kneeling down beside him with false sympathy. "You'll live long enough to tell us everything you know about your handlers. Their names, their locations, their other embedded assets." Alex's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because here's something you should understand about Ghost Division operatives, Reynolds. We don't just kill people. We make them disappear so completely that their own mothers forget they ever existed." The gunfire had stopped completely. In the distance, Alex could hear footsteps approaching, measured, professional, familiar. "And sometimes," she added with genuine warmth, "we make them wish they'd never been born." Reynolds's eyes widened in absolute terror as he finally understood what he had stumbled into. He hadn't captured a Ghost Division operative who was operating alone and vulnerable. He had walked directly into a Ghost Division trap that had been months in the making. The final combat simulation of the semester was specifically designed to break pilots both mentally and physically. Operation Deadfall was a strike mission that had never been completed successfully in the Air Force's 15-year history. Despite attempts by some of the most promising military minds in the country, the mission parameters appeared simple in concept, but were absolutely impossible in execution. Infiltrate a heavily defended enemy valley in an A-10. Thunderbolt 2. Navigate through a network of surface-to-air missile sites, anti-aircraft artillery, and enemy fighter patrols. Destroy a high-value target, a bunker housing enemy leadership, and extract through the same deadly corridor, all while operating under strict radio silence and with no support. Alex stood with her 5-person team in the pre-mission briefing room, studying the holographic display of the valley with the same defeated expression she had maintained for months. The terrain was a nightmarish maze of interconnected mountain ridges, deep ravines, and hidden plateaus, all monitored by an advanced artificial intelligence system that controlled the enemy forces with tactical brilliance. The hostile units were equipped with military-grade weapons and programmed with adaptive intelligence that learned from pilot strategies in real time, making each attempt more difficult than the last. "This is complete suicide," whispered Tommy Clark, a nervous pilot from California whose father was a decorated Navy SEAL. "Look at these sight lines. They'll cut us down the moment we enter the valley." "The base record is 18 minutes before total mission failure," added Lisa Park, a tactical prodigy whose analytical mind had earned her top marks in every strategy course. "Most pilots don't even last 5 minutes before they're completely shot down." Alex nodded along with their concerns, maintaining her carefully constructed facade of anxious incompetence. Over the past month, since the incident in the East Hangar that had resulted in several mysterious transfers and accidents, she had been even more careful about maintaining her cover identity. The official story was that Colonel Reynolds had suffered a severe psychological breakdown during an unauthorized night exercise and was now recovering in a classified military psychiatric facility. Sergeant Rodriguez had been quietly transferred to another posting without explanation. General Harrison remained in command, but Alex could feel his eyes constantly searching for any sign that she was more than she appeared to be. "Vega, you'll take second position," announced team leader Brad Morrison, a square-jawed pilot whose grandfather was a Medal of Honor recipient. The assignment was clearly meant as an insult, putting the weakest team member in one of the most dangerous positions. "Try not to get us all killed in the first 30 seconds of the mission." Alex ducked her head submissively, playing her role perfectly. "I'll do my best, sir." The observation deck above the simulation chamber was packed with instructors, base officials, and visiting dignitaries whose presence suggested this was far more than a routine training exercise. Alex spotted General Harrison among them, along with several Pentagon officials whose security clearances were high enough to observe classified training scenarios. In the front row sat a woman Alex didn't recognize, mid-50s, silver hair, wearing a civilian suit that probably cost more than most pilots' annual salary combined. Her bearing and the deference shown to her by others suggested someone with significant authority in the intelligence community. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the simulation controller, "Operation Deadfall will commence in 60 seconds. All safety protocols are active. Lethal force is authorized against hostile targets." Alex's team took their assigned positions in the virtual A-10s at the mission start point. The simulated environment was incredibly realistic. She could feel the vibration of the Thunderbolt's engines, hear the distinctive growl of the GAU-8 Avenger cannon, sense the weight of the aircraft as it responded to her controls. The Air Force's simulation technology was military-grade, designed to prepare pilots for the psychological stress of real combat situations. "Remember the plan," Morrison whispered into his communication unit. "Park and Williams take the eastern approach. Thompson and Clark go high for air defense suppression. Vega, you create a distraction at the valley entrance while we flank from the west." Alex almost smiled despite herself. They were using her as bait, expecting her to draw enemy fire while the real pilots executed the actual mission. It was tactically sound, if morally questionable. It was also exactly what she needed to demonstrate her true capabilities. "Simulation commences now," announced the controller. The valley erupted into chaos as Alex's team moved into their assigned positions. Immediately, the heat-controlled defenders opened fire from concealed positions, their weapon systems programmed to deliver visual and tactile feedback that simulated being hit with terrifying accuracy. The first pilot went down within seconds. Tommy Clark caught in a devastating crossfire as he attempted to breach the eastern approach according to Morrison's flawed plan. "Clark's down hard," Lisa Park's voice crackled through the communication system. "We need to abort and regroup immediately." "Negative," Morrison replied, his voice tight with stress and misplaced pride. "Continue the mission as planned. Vega, start your distraction now." Alex approached the valley entrance with apparent reluctance, her aircraft wobbling as if she had never flown one before in her entire life. The defensive systems immediately locked onto her small frame. Multiple targeting alerts blared in her cockpit like a symphony of death. In the observation deck, she could hear murmurs of anticipation. Everyone expected her to be eliminated within moments, providing a brief distraction before the real pilots attempted their assault. Instead, Alex did something that made the entire room fall into stunned silence. She smiled with genuine pleasure. Then she flew like death itself had taken wing. Alex's first action was to slam her A-10 into a dive that took her completely under the primary SAM site's firing arc. As she pulled up from the dive, her targeting system was already tracking toward a hidden anti-aircraft position on the second ridge, concealed location that shouldn't have been visible from her angle, according to the mission briefing. Her cannon fire took out the A-gun with surgical precision that would have impressed veteran combat pilots. "What the hell?" Morrison's voice cut off abruptly as Alex continued moving with fluid grace. She flowed through the valley like liquid shadow, her aircraft seeming to anticipate the AI targeting systems before they could achieve weapon lock. A missile sailed toward her position in a perfect arc. Alex rolled her A-10 and deployed countermeasures with such perfect timing that the missile not only missed but continued on to strike a cluster of enemy positions, eliminating 3 hostiles with their own ordnance. "That's not humanly possible," someone whispered in the observation deck. Alex threaded her Thunderbolt between 2 mountain ridges that were supposedly too narrow for the aircraft to navigate, emerging directly above a group of 5 enemy SAM sites. What followed wasn't combat flying in any traditional sense. It was artistic expression through aerial violence. She moved through them like a dancer performing a deadly ballet, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next with mathematical precision. A burst of cannon fire to disable one site. A perfectly placed bomb to take out another. A low-altitude strafing run that sent enemy troops scattering with bone-breaking force. In less than 10 seconds, all 5 were eliminated. "Vega, what are you doing?" Morrison's voice was panicked now, his carefully planned mission falling apart. "That's not the plan we agreed on." Alex ignored him completely. She was no longer following their amateur tactics developed by pilots playing at being soldiers. She was hunting with the skills of a professional killer. The valley's layout revealed itself to her trained eye like a three-dimensional puzzle she had solved countless times before. She could see the optimal routes, the kill zones, the defensive weaknesses that the AI had built into the scenario based on real-world special operations missions. This wasn't a test designed for regular pilots. It was a simulation of actual Ghost Division operations, the kind of mission she ran on a monthly basis. Alex moved through the valley complex like a ghost, appearing behind enemy positions before they knew she was there. She used the terrain as a weapon, triggering an avalanche that eliminated an entire squad, redirecting the valley's own automated defense systems to target the remaining hostiles. Her movements were economical, precise, and absolutely lethal. In the observation deck, the silence was deafening. "Sir," the simulation controller said quietly to General Harrison, "should we abort the exercise?" Harrison's face was pale, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles were white. "No, let it continue." Alex reached the target location, a reinforced bunker in the valley center that was supposed to be completely impregnable. According to the scenario design, the AI had positioned its strongest defenses here, including automated turrets and a squad of elite guards programmed with advanced tactical intelligence. Previous pilot teams had never even gotten close to this objective. Alex studied the defenses for exactly 3 seconds, then moved with inhuman speed and precision. She maneuvered her A-10 through a series of canyons that weren't supposed to be navigable according to the valley's design. The automated defenses tracked her movement, but couldn't achieve a firing solution. She was moving too fast, too unpredictably, using techniques that belonged in classified Special Forces manuals. When she reached the bunker, Alex produced a series of maneuvers that defied the laws of physics as understood by conventional pilots. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was a notoriously unforgiving aircraft, designed for durability and firepower rather than agility. Yet in her hands, it danced like a ballet performer, pirouetting around incoming fire and delivering precise strikes that systematically dismantled the bunker's defenses. The turrets went offline one by one as their sensors were overwhelmed by her unconventional approach vectors. Alex lined up her final attack run, her targeting systems locked onto the bunker's lone vulnerability, a small ventilation shaft that led directly to the command center. "Target secured," Alex announced calmly into her communication unit. "Beginning extraction sequence." The timer showed 12 minutes and 37 seconds, a new base record by more than 5 minutes. But Alex wasn't finished. Instead of heading for the extraction point as mission parameters required, she began systematically hunting down the remaining enemy forces throughout the valley. Not because the mission required it, but because she could. Because she wanted everyone watching to understand exactly what they were dealing with. When the simulation finally ended, Alex stood alone in the virtual valley's central clearing, surrounded by the digital wreckage of 20 eliminated hostile units. Her teammates were scattered across the complex Morrison, shot down from a simulated SAM strike. Park and the others eliminated in the first few minutes of combat. The target was destroyed. The mission was complete, and Alexandra Vega, the squadron's biggest failure, had just accomplished something that seasoned combat pilots would find challenging. In the observation deck, the woman in the expensive suit leaned forward and spoke quietly to General Harrison. "General, I think we need to have a very serious conversation about Captain Vega." Harrison nodded slowly, his face grim with the weight of terrible knowledge. "Yes, ma'am. I believe we do." Alex looked up at the observation deck and gave a small, innocent wave that fooled absolutely no one who mattered. The helpless little girl was gone forever, replaced by something far more dangerous. The mask had finally slipped completely, and there was no putting it back on. The real game was about to begin, and Alexandra Vega was ready to play for keeps. The silence in General Harrison's office was suffocating, thick with tension that seemed to press against the walls like a living thing. Alex sat in the leather chair across from his desk, her hands folded neatly in her lap, maintaining the posture of a confused pilot who had absolutely no idea why she had been summoned for this private meeting. But the atmosphere in the room was electric, crackling between them like a live wire carrying enough voltage to kill. Harrison hadn't spoken for 3 full minutes. He simply stared at her with the intensity of a predator studying prey, his weathered face a mask of barely controlled emotion. On his desk lay a thick manila folder marked with classification stamps that Alex recognized, the kind that meant people disappeared for even knowing such documents existed. Finally, Harrison reached for a remote control and activated the wall-mounted display. The screen flickered to life, showing crystal-clear footage from yesterday's simulation chamber. Alex watched herself move through the valley like a force of nature, eliminating targets with techniques that belonged in the most classified training manuals in existence. 12 minutes and 37 seconds, Harrison said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you know what the previous record was, Captain Vega? Alex kept her voice steady and innocent. No, sir. 18 minutes, set by a team of Navy SEALs during a demonstration 3 years ago. Experienced operators with multiple combat deployments and decades of combined training. Harrison paused the footage on an image of Alex maneuvering her A-10 through a canyon with inhuman grace. They used the exact same tactics you employed yesterday. Identical techniques down to the smallest details. I got lucky, sir. Adrenaline, I guess. Harrison's laugh was bitter and completely devoid of humor. Adrenaline? Yes, that must be it. He clicked to another video file with deliberate precision. This is surveillance footage from the East Hangar taken the night Colonel Reynolds had his accident. Alex's blood chilled, but she kept her expression perfectly neutral. The footage was grainy, shot through night vision cameras, but it clearly showed a figure moving through the abandoned building with grace that defied human limitations. The timestamp showed it was recorded 20 minutes before the official incident report. Interesting thing about this footage, Harrison continued with the patience of a chess master setting up checkmate. It was automatically deleted by the security system the next morning. Routine purge according to the computer logs. Except I had a backup copy made. His eyes bored into Alex's with laser intensity. The figure in this video moves exactly like you did in yesterday's simulation. Alex said nothing. There was literally nothing she could say that wouldn't make the situation exponentially worse. Harrison stood and walked to his window, gazing out at the base grounds where pilots were running their morning physical training, completely unaware of the deadly conversation taking place above them. I've been in the military for 32 years. Vega, I've seen things that would give most people nightmares for the rest of their lives. I've worked alongside special forces, intelligence operatives, black operations specialists. He turned back to face her with the slow deliberation of a man who had made a terrible decision. I know what real killers look like. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Alex calculated her options with computer-like precision. The distance to the door, the weapons within reach, the probability of fighting her way out of the building without killing innocent people. All scenarios ended badly for everyone involved. I don't know what you mean, sir. Stop! Harrison's voice cracked like a whip. Just stop with the act. We both know exactly what you are. The only question that matters now is why you're here. Alex met his gaze steadily, her training screaming at her to maintain cover at all costs. I'm here to learn, sir. To serve my country. Harrison returned to his desk and opened the manila folder with surgical precision. Alexandra Vega, age 28, from Portland, Oregon. Father deceased. Mother works as a nurse. Graduated flight school with average marks, no combat experience. Assigned to Ghost Squadron on orders that nobody can explain. He pulled out a photograph and slid it across the desk. It showed a young woman, maybe 25 years old, with Alex's face, but different eyes, softer, more innocent, unmarked by violence. This is the real Alexandra Vega. She died in a training accident 6 months ago, along with her instructor. Tragic story. Harrison's voice carried genuine sadness. Except somehow she managed to apply for transfer to this base 3 months after her death. Alex stared at the photograph, her mind racing through contingency plans. Ghost Division's forgers were the best in the world, but apparently not perfect enough to fool a determined investigation. So who are you really? Harrison leaned forward with the intensity of an interrogator. CIA, NSA? Some new black operations program I haven't heard of? Alex remained silent, her training absolute. Harrison sighed and pulled out another file, this one even more heavily classified. After yesterday's simulation, I made some very careful calls, reached out to contacts in the intelligence community, asked some extremely discreet questions about unusual training programs. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. One name kept coming up. A program so classified that most people in the government think it's a myth. Alex's heart stopped beating for a full second. Ghost Division. The words seemed to echo in the small office like a gunshot. Harrison watched Alex's face with microscopic attention, looking for any reaction that would confirm his suspicions. She gave him absolutely nothing. Officially, Ghost Division doesn't exist. Harrison continued with the relentless logic of a prosecutor building a case. No budget line items, no personnel records, no operational reports anywhere in the system. But unofficially, it's rumored to be the most elite special operations unit in the world. Operatives trained from childhood, given resources and authority that would make the president nervous. He stood again, pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. The stories are incredible, if you believe them. Ghost Division operatives who can infiltrate any facility, eliminate any target, disappear without a trace. Ghosts who serve America's interests in ways that can never be officially acknowledged. Alex's training screamed at her to maintain cover, to deny everything, to play the confused pilot until the very end. But something in Harrison's voice made her pause, something that sounded almost like respect rather than accusation. The woman in the observation deck yesterday, Alex said quietly, speaking for the first time without her cover persona. Who was she? Harrison's eyes widened slightly. It was the first time Alex had acknowledged knowing more than she should. Deputy Director Sarah Vance, Defense Intelligence Agency. She's been tracking unusual activities at military bases across the country for the past year. Security breaches, personnel disappearances, training accidents that don't quite add up. Harrison sat back down heavily. She thinks there's a coordinated effort to compromise our military aviation system. Alex processed this information with professional detachment. And you think I'm part of that effort? No. Harrison's answer was immediate and certain. I think you're here to stop it. The admission hung between them like a bridge that neither was sure they should cross. The night Colonel Reynolds was injured, Harrison continued carefully, 3 other pilots disappeared from the base. Officially, they transferred to other units for personal reasons. Unofficially, they vanished without a trace. No forwarding addresses, no contact with family members, no digital footprints. Alex's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had known about Reynolds and Rodriguez, but not about other missing pilots. Then there are the financial irregularities, Harrison continued, opening his desk drawer. Equipment purchases that don't match inventory records. Communication systems with capabilities far beyond what a base needs. Training scenarios that seem designed to identify and recruit specific types of pilots. He pulled out a small device, a listening bug, the exact same type Alex had planted weeks ago. I found this in my office yesterday morning. Military-grade surveillance equipment, the kind that costs more than most people's cars. He set it on the desk between them like evidence in a trial. The interesting thing is, it wasn't transmitting to any foreign intelligence service. It was sending data to a server farm in Virginia that officially doesn't exist. Alex stared at the device, her mind reeling, her own surveillance equipment turned against her. "So here's what I think happened," Harrison said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who had solved a complex puzzle. Ghost Division discovered that Sandstone Air Force Base was compromised by foreign intelligence. They needed someone on the inside, someone who could investigate without raising suspicion. So they sent their best operative, gave her a perfect cover identity, and let her play the part of a failing pilot while she gathered intelligence. Alex said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. "The question is," Harrison continued, "what happens now? Because Deputy Director Vance is extremely interested in meeting with you, and I suspect your handlers are equally interested in extracting you before that meeting can happen." Alex finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want, General?" Harrison smiled for the first time since she had entered his office. "I want to help, because whatever conspiracy you've uncovered, whatever threat you're here to neutralize, it's bigger than just selling secrets to foreign governments. It's about something that threatens the very foundation of our military." He stood and walked to a wall safe Alex hadn't noticed before. Inside were files, photographs, and what appeared to be financial records that painted a picture of systematic corruption. "I've been investigating the irregularities for months, but I'm just one man with limited resources and authority." Harrison turned back to face her. "You, on the other hand, have the backing of the most powerful intelligence organization in the world." He returned to his desk with the evidence. "I think it's time we pooled our resources and ended this threat permanently." Alex studied his face with the intensity of someone whose life depended on reading people correctly. Her training told her this could be an elaborate trap, a sophisticated setup designed to expose her mission and compromise Ghost Division. But her instincts, honed by years of reading people in life or death situations, told her something different. General Harrison was telling the truth. "If I were hypothetically part of such an organization," Alex said carefully, "what would you want in return for your cooperation?" "Justice," Harrison replied immediately. "For the pilots who've disappeared, for the secrets that have been sold, for the trust that's been betrayed. I want the people responsible to pay for what they've done." Alex nodded slowly. "And if that justice came in a form that could never be officially acknowledged?" Harrison's smile was grim and determined. "Then I suppose I'd have to live with the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the good guys win." Alex made her decision with the cold calculation that had kept her alive through dozens of missions. "General," she said, dropping her cover accent completely, "I think we need to have a very different kind of conversation." "Yes," Harrison agreed with obvious relief. "I believe we do." Outside the office window, the base continued its daily routine, completely unaware that the balance of power had just shifted dramatically. The hunter had found an unexpected ally, and the hunted were about to discover that their prey had developed very sharp teeth. The real war was about to begin, and Alexandra Vega was ready to show everyone what Ghost Division operatives were truly capable of when the gloves came off. The secure conference room in the base's basement had been swept for surveillance devices 3 times in the past hour by military technicians, with the highest security clearances. General Harrison sat across from Alex while Deputy Director Sarah Vance observed from the head of the table with the intensity of someone evaluating a potentially explosive situation. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across their faces, giving the meeting the atmosphere of a war council planning for a decisive battle. Alex had abandoned her pilot's uniform for civilian clothes, dark jeans, a black sweater, and boots that looked ordinary but contained enough hidden weapons to outfit a small army. Without the baggy flight suit, her true physique was visible lean muscle, perfect posture, and the kind of controlled stillness that marked a professional killer. "Let's start with the basics," Vance said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Your real name, rank, and operational designation." Alex met her gaze steadily. "Lieutenant Alexandra Vega, Ghost Division. Operational designation Phantom 7. Vance nodded as if this confirmed intelligence she had already suspected. "And your mission parameters?" "Infiltrate Sandstone Air Force Base under deep cover. Identify and neutralize the security breach that was compromising classified military intelligence. Gather evidence of foreign infiltration and eliminate all hostile assets permanently." "Eliminate," Harrison repeated quietly. "Not capture, not arrest. Eliminate." Alex's expression didn't change by even a fraction. "Ghost Division doesn't take prisoners, General. We solve problems permanently." Vance leaned forward with professional interest. "How many problems have you solved since arriving at Sandstone?" Colonel Reynolds was the primary target Chinese Ministry of State Security operative embedded for 4 years. He's currently in a black site facility undergoing enhanced interrogation. Alex's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing routine paperwork. Sergeant Rodriguez was a secondary asset recruited through financial pressure. He suffered a fatal training accident 2 weeks ago. Harrison's face went pale. "Rodriguez is dead." Officially, he was killed in a helicopter crash during a routine maintenance flight. His body was recovered from the wreckage with injuries consistent with the accident. Alex pulled out a tablet and showed them photographs that made both officials look away. Unofficially, he was terminated after providing intelligence about the broader conspiracy. The images showed Rodriguez's broken body in the twisted metal of the helicopter fuselage, but Alex's clinical description made it clear this was no accident. "Jesus Christ," Harrison whispered. "You're talking about murder." "I'm talking about national security," Alex replied with ice-cold professionalism. Rodriguez was selling the identities of undercover intelligence operatives to foreign governments. 3 CIA assets in Eastern Europe were killed because of information he provided. A Navy SEAL team in Syria was ambushed because he leaked their operational plans. Her eyes blazed with controlled fury. "How many American lives is his worth, General?" Vance held up a hand before Harrison could respond. "What about the other missing pilots?" Alex's expression darkened considerably. "That's where things become complicated." Reynolds and Rodriguez were foot soldiers in a much larger operation. The real conspiracy involves something called Project Prometheus. She activated the room's holographic display, showing a complex organizational chart with dozens of names and connections that painted a picture of systematic infiltration. Project Prometheus is a long-term infiltration program run jointly by Chinese and Russian intelligence services. The goal is to place assets in key positions throughout the American military and intelligence communities, not just spies, but actual sleeper agents who will spend decades building their covers before activation. The chart showed connections between military bases, defense contractors, and government agencies across the entire country. Sandstone Air Force Base was chosen as a primary recruitment center because of its elite status. Graduates go on to command positions in every branch of the Air Force. If you can compromise them during their formative years, you own them for life. Harrison studied the chart with growing horror. "How many bases are compromised?" 17 that we know of, possibly more. Alex highlighted several nodes on the display. The missing pilots weren't kidnapped. They were recruited, offered money, blackmail material on their families, or ideological conversion. Some volunteered willingly. Vance's jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. "Where are they now?" "Dead, mostly. Once they provided the intelligence their handlers needed, they became liabilities that had to be eliminated. A few were relocated to China or Russia with new identities, but most were killed to prevent exposure." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just espionage. It was systematic infiltration on a scale that threatened the entire military structure of the United States. "How long has this been going on?" Harrison asked. "Project Prometheus began 15 years ago, shortly after Sandstone was established as an elite training center. The timing wasn't coincidental." Alex brought up architectural plans of the base. The base was specifically designed to be compromised from the very beginning. She highlighted specific areas of the building. "Look at the communication systems, the computer networks, the security protocols. Everything was built with back doors that allow external access. The implications were staggering. The server room you thought was secure has been transmitting copies of every file to Beijing since day one. The psychological evaluation protocols used to screen pilots are designed to identify potential assets and vulnerabilities. Even the curriculum has been modified to normalize certain types of moral flexibility." Vance leaned back in her chair, her face grim. "You're telling me that Sandstone Air Force Base is essentially a foreign intelligence operation disguised as an American military facility?" "Not just Sandstone. The entire network of elite Air Force training facilities has been compromised to varying degrees. We're looking at the systematic corruption of America's future air combat leadership." Harrison stood and began pacing like a caged animal. "This is impossible. The oversight, the inspections, the background checks. How could something this massive go undetected for 15 years? Alex's smile was cold as Arctic wind. "Because the people doing the oversight are part of the conspiracy." The organizational chart expanded to show connections reaching into the highest levels of the Pentagon and intelligence community. Deputy Secretary of Defense James Morrison. His son Brad is a pilot here, and he's been feeding information to his father for 2 years. General Patricia Reynolds, Marcus's mother. She's been providing classified intelligence to Chinese handlers in exchange for her son's safety. Admiral James Palmer. His daughter Jennifer has been recording private conversations with other pilots' families for blackmail purposes. "The beauty of Project Prometheus is its scope," Alex continued. "It's not just about stealing secrets. It's about shaping policy, influencing decisions, and gradually steering American military doctrine in directions that benefit our enemies." Vance was studying the chart with the intensity of someone trying to memorize every detail. "How did Ghost Division discover this?" "We didn't, initially. We were investigating a series of seemingly unrelated security breaches across multiple agencies. It took 3 years of analysis to identify the pattern and trace it back to the military aviation system." Alex pulled up another file. "The breakthrough came when we realized that every compromised operation had at least one participant who was a graduate of an elite Air Force training program." She showed them a timeline of intelligence failures over the past decade, each one connected to base graduates in key positions. "Once we identified the pattern, we began placing operatives in the bases to investigate from the inside. I'm the 7th agent assigned to Sandstone. The previous 6 were all discovered and eliminated." Harrison stopped pacing. "Eliminated how?" "Training accidents mostly. 1 suicide, 2 plane crashes, 1 drowning during a water survival exercise. All very convincing. All completely untraceable." Alex's voice carried a note of professional respect for her enemy's competence. "Whoever is running this operation knows how to clean up loose ends." "But you survived," Vance observed. "Because I changed the rules of engagement. Instead of trying to maintain perfect cover while investigating, I let them discover me, but only partially. They knew I was more than I appeared, but they didn't know how much more. That gave me the tactical advantage I needed to turn the tables." Alex brought up surveillance footage from the East Hangar confrontation. "When they tried to eliminate me, I was ready. I used their own trap against them, captured Reynolds alive, and extracted the intelligence I needed to map the entire network." The footage showed Alex moving through the abandoned building like a predator, systematically eliminating the team sent to kill her. The interrogation of Colonel Reynolds provided the final pieces of the puzzle names. Locations, operational procedures, financial networks, everything we needed to roll up the entire conspiracy. Vance leaned forward. So what's the plan? Mass arrests? Public exposure? Alex shook her head. Public exposure would cause a panic and potentially compromise other ongoing operations. Mass arrests would alert the foreign handlers and allow them to activate sleeper agents we haven't identified yet. She brought up a new display showing a complex operational timeline. Ghost Division prefers a more surgical approach. Over the next 6 months, every compromised individual will suffer an unfortunate accident. Plane crashes, heart attacks, training mishaps, suicides brought on by personal problems. Nothing that can be traced back to us. Nothing that will alert the enemy network. Harrison stared at her in horror. You're talking about assassinating dozens of people, American citizens, military officers. I'm talking about removing traitors who have sold out their country for money. Alex's voice was ice cold. These people have caused the deaths of American soldiers, compromised national security, and betrayed everything they swore to protect. They deserve no mercy. But the legal system can't handle this, Vance interrupted. The evidence is largely classified. The scope is too large for conventional prosecution, and the damage to public confidence would be catastrophic. Sometimes justice has to be served in the shadows. Alex nodded. Ghost Division exists precisely for situations like this, when the normal rules don't apply, when the stakes are too high for conventional solutions. We do what needs to be done. She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the base grounds where pilots were going about their daily routines, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. The question is whether you can live with that knowledge, General, because once you know what we're going to do, you become part of it. There's no going back. Harrison looked at the organizational chart, at the names of people he had known and trusted for years, at the evidence of betrayal that ran deeper than he had ever imagined. Finally, he spoke with quiet determination. What do you need from me? Alex smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, it reached her eyes. Just keep being the honorable soldier you've always been, General. Leave the rest to the ghosts. Outside, the sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky the color of blood. Soon, the real hunting would begin. 6 months later, Alexandra Vega stood at attention on Sandstone Air Force Base's main runway, wearing the crisp dress uniform of an A-10 combat pilot. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the hunched, defeated posture of the woman who had arrived 9 months earlier. In her place stood a confident pilot whose bearing commanded respect from everyone present. The runway was lined with aircraft, pilots, and distinguished guests for the Deadfall Challenge ceremony. On the raised platform, General Harrison prepared to deliver his address to the assembled audience. But this wasn't the same man who had run the base for the past 5 years. The events of the previous months had aged him, carved new lines around his eyes, and given his voice a gravity that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice carrying clearly across the tarmac. "Today we celebrate not just the completion of the most challenging combat simulation ever designed, but the preservation of everything this base represents." In the audience, Alex spotted familiar faces. Rebecca Martinez, now her closest friend at the base, sat in the front row with tears of pride in her eyes. Deputy Director Vance occupied a place of honor among the distinguished guests, her presence a reminder of how much had changed. And scattered throughout the crowd were new faces, replacement instructors, visiting officials, and pilots who had transferred in to fill the gaps left by those who had mysteriously departed. The departures had been subtle, spread out over months to avoid suspicion. Colonel Reynolds had suffered a psychological breakdown and been quietly transferred to a psychiatric facility. Jennifer Harding had been killed in a car accident during Christmas break, a tragic collision with a drunk driver who himself died in the crash. Derek Thompson had committed suicide, apparently overwhelmed by pressure and family expectations. Sergeant Rodriguez's helicopter accident had been the first of many unfortunate incidents that befell base personnel. Each death had been perfectly crafted, completely believable, and utterly untraceable, the work of professionals who understood that the best assassinations look like anything but murder. "This year has tested us in ways we never expected," Harrison continued. "We have faced challenges that forced us to examine our values, our loyalties, and our commitment to the principles that define American military service." Alex's mind drifted to the night 3 months ago when the last of the conspirators had been eliminated. Admiral Palmer had suffered a heart attack in his Pentagon office, brought on by a rare toxin that mimicked the effects of cardiac stress. General Reynolds had died in a plane crash during a routine inspection flight mechanical failure, according to the investigation. Deputy Secretary Morrison had been found dead in his study, an apparent suicide brought on by a corruption scandal that had mysteriously come to light. The beauty of Ghost Division's work was its invisibility. To the outside world, these were simply tragic coincidences, the kind of random misfortunes that befell even the most powerful people. Only a handful of individuals knew the truth, that America's most elite killers had systematically dismantled a foreign intelligence network that had taken 15 years to build. "But from these challenges we've emerged stronger," Harrison said, his eyes finding Alex in the crowd. "We have learned that true strength comes not from the absence of adversity, but from how we respond when our principles are tested." The ceremony continued with the presentation of awards and honors. Alex watched as her former tormentors, those who had survived the purge, received their commissions and assignments. Their attitudes toward her had changed dramatically once her true capabilities became known. The mockery had been replaced by a mixture of respect and fear that followed her wherever she went. Tommy Clark, who had once whispered about her failures, now sought her advice on tactical problems. Lisa Park, the analytical prodigy, had become one of Alex's most devoted admirers after witnessing her strategic thinking in advanced war games. Even Brad Morrison, the former team leader who had used her as bait, now deferred to her judgment in combat simulations. "The graduating class of Sandstone represents the future of American air combat leadership," Harrison announced. "These men and women will carry forward the values of honor, courage, and integrity that define our armed forces." Alex almost smiled at the irony. The base that had been designed to corrupt America's future leaders was now producing some of the most dedicated and principled officers in the military. The removal of foreign influence had allowed the institution to fulfill its true purpose. "Before we conclude today's ceremony," Harrison said, "I want to recognize one pilot whose journey exemplifies the transformation we have all undergone. Captain Alexandra Vega, please step forward." Alex felt every eye on the tarmac turn toward her as she made her way to the platform. The whispers followed her stories that had grown in the telling, legends that painted her as everything from a prodigy to a ghost. The truth, as always, was more complex than the myths. Captain Vega arrived at this base as an unknown quantity, Harrison said as Alex took her place beside him. She faced adversity, overcame challenges, and ultimately proved that true strength cannot be measured by conventional standards. He turned to face her directly. "Alex, your time at Sandstone has been extraordinary. You have shown us that sometimes the most important battles are fought not in distant skies, but in the shadows, by those who serve without recognition or reward." Alex met his gaze, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. This was as close as he could come to acknowledging what had really happened, the role she had played in saving the base from foreign control. "It is my honor to present you with the Sandstone Medal of Excellence, awarded to pilots who demonstrate exceptional service to their country and their fellow aviators." As Harrison pinned the medal to her uniform, Alex felt a strange sense of completion. The mission was over. The conspiracy had been destroyed. The base was safe. But more than that, She had found something she hadn't expected when she first arrived, a sense of belonging. "Thank you, sir," Alex said quietly, her voice carrying just enough emotion to seem genuine without revealing too much. The ceremony concluded with the traditional flyover, a formation of A-10, thunderbolts roaring across the desert sky in perfect alignment. Alex spoke the aviator's creed along with her classmates, but for her, the words carried a different weight. She had already fulfilled that oath in ways they could never imagine. As the pilots dispersed, Rebecca Martinez caught up with Alex on the tarmac. "I can't believe it's over," Rebecca said, her eyes bright with excitement about her upcoming assignment to Nellis Air Force Base. "It feels like just yesterday. You were getting mocked by Reynolds." Alex smiled, remembering the woman who had arrived at Sandstone 9 months ago. "That feels like a lifetime ago. You know, I never did figure out what happened to Reynolds," Rebecca continued. "One day he was here, the next day he was gone. Same with Rodriguez and some of the others. It's like they just disappeared. People leave for all kinds of reasons," Alex said carefully. "Sometimes it's better not to ask too many questions." Rebecca studied her friend's face, perhaps sensing the deeper currents beneath the surface. "Alex, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That day in the Deadfall simulation, when you did what you did, that wasn't luck, was it? That wasn't adrenaline or beginner's luck or any of the explanations people gave." Alex considered her answer carefully. "What do you think?" "I think," Rebecca said slowly, "that you're not who you pretend to be. I think you came here for a reason that had nothing to do with flying A-10s, and I think whatever that reason was, it was important enough that people died for it." Alex felt a chill run down her spine. Rebecca was more perceptive than she had given her credit for. "And I think," Rebecca continued, "that I'm okay with not knowing the details. Because whatever you did, whoever you really are, you made this place better. You made us all better." Alex felt something she rarely experienced: genuine emotion. "Thank you, Rebecca. That means more than you know." As they reached the end of the tarmac, Alex spotted a familiar figure waiting by a black sedan in the parking lot. Agent Williams, her Ghost Division handler, dressed in an expensive suit that made him look like any other government official. It was time to go. "I have to leave," Alex told Rebecca. "My ride is here." Rebecca followed her gaze to the sedan with government plates. "Let me guess your next assignment?" "Something like that." They embraced, and Alex was surprised by how difficult it was to let go. In all her years of training and operations, she had never formed genuine friendships. The mission at Sandstone had changed her in ways she was still discovering. "Stay safe, Alex," Rebecca whispered. "Whatever you do, wherever you go, remember that you have friends who care about you." Alex nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She walked toward the sedan, her posture straight and confident, every inch the elite soldier she had always been. As the car pulled away from Sandstone Air Force Base, Alex looked back through the rear window. The institution that had been designed to corrupt America's future leaders was now fulfilling its true purpose, producing officers who would serve with honor and integrity. The foreign conspiracy had been destroyed, the traitors eliminated, and the threat neutralized. But more than that, Alex had learned something about herself. She was more than just a weapon, more than just a tool for eliminating threats. She was capable of friendship, of loyalty, of caring about something beyond the mission. "How do you feel?" Agent Williams asked from the driver's seat. Alex considered the question. "Different," she said finally. "Changed." "Good different or bad different?" Alex smiled, thinking of Rebecca's words, of General Harrison's respect, of the pilots who now looked up to her as a role model rather than a target for mockery. "Good different," she said. "Definitely good different." The sedan disappeared into the desert, carrying Alex toward her next mission, her next identity, her next chance to serve in the shadows. But she would never forget her time at Sandstone Air Force Base, where a woman pretending to be weak had become strong, where enemies had become friends, and where the most important victory had been won not through violence, but through the simple act of proving that honor and courage could triumph over corruption and betrayal. Behind them, the base continued its daily routine, unaware that it had been saved by a ghost who had learned to be human. 1 year later, Alexandra Vega sat in the cockpit of an A-10 Thunderbolt II, her eyes scanning the rugged mountain terrain below. Operation Deadfall was no longer a simulation. It was a real-world mission with actual lives at stake. Intelligence had located a high-value target bunker deep in enemy territory, protected by the most sophisticated air defense network ever deployed. Impossible, the general had said during the briefing. That valley is a death trap. We'd need an entire squadron, and even then, we'd lose half our birds. But Alex hadn't been sent because the mission was possible. She'd been sent because it was impossible, and impossible missions were what Ghost Division specialized in. As she guided her aircraft into the mouth of the valley, Alex activated the specialized countermeasures her handlers had provided, technology that officially didn't exist, developed by engineers whose names would never appear in any government database. The mission was brutally simple: fly through the most heavily defended airspace in the world, destroy the bunker housing enemy leadership, and extract without being detected. No support. No backup. Just one pilot with the skills and training to accomplish what an entire air wing couldn't. The first SAM site appeared on her radar. Then another, and another, a constellation of death waiting to reach up and pluck her from the sky. But Alex had faced worse odds before. She'd infiltrated Sandstone, exposed a foreign conspiracy, and eliminated every threat without raising suspicion. This was just another day at the office. She maneuvered her aircraft with impossible precision, threading the needle between overlapping radar coverage zones, using the terrain to mask her approach. The enemy defenses never detected her presence until it was too late. Her cannon roared to life, 30mm depleted uranium rounds ripping through hardened concrete as if it were paper. The bunker collapsed in on itself, burying the enemy leadership beneath tons of rubble. Mission accomplished in less than 15 minutes. As Alex turned her aircraft toward home, she allowed herself a small smile. She thought about Rebecca, now commanding her own squadron. About Harrison, promoted to the Joint Chiefs for his leadership during a challenging transition period. About the pilots she'd trained, now serving with distinction around the world. Some heroes wore uniforms and received medals in public ceremonies. Others were shadows and left no trace. Both served. Both sacrificed. Both mattered. And sometimes, when the stakes were highest and the odds were longest, it was the ones who fought unseen who made all the difference in the world. Alexandra Vega had learned that truth at Sandstone Air Force Base, and she would carry it with her for the rest of her life, however long that might be in her chosen profession. The ghost was ready for whatever shadows awaited her next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.